Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan!
Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod, hosted by Tony Pesta and Jackson Flickinger. You can find all of our work for Fear the Sword and Write Down Euclid in the description below. Today, joining us to discuss the Cavs-Bucks mini-series as well as the imminent return of Evan Mobley, we are joined by special guest Jason Richardson of Northeast Ohio Sports Insider. Jason, how are you doing?
What's going on, fellas? How you guys doing? Thank you for having me on the illustrious show.
No, I have been pushing for this for months, and Jason's just been ducking us the whole time. So glad that he finally made time for us.
That's wild. That's really wild.
Opening up the show with some slander.
I knew
Jackson's
it was coming.
Specialty.
I just didn't know which way it was coming, but I knew it was coming.
Well, you knew it was coming from him. But
yeah.
Let's just get started right away with some rapid fire takeaways from the two games in Milwaukee. Cleveland split their road trip, which all things considered, I would say is a win. Jason, how did you feel about the Cavs in Milwaukee?
It went about as expected. It's very hard to beat a team by 40 and then play them the next week and think that they were going to win that game. If they had won that game, it would have been crazy. But I kind of expected them to lose the first one, and I expected the second one to be a lot more competitive, and they ended up winning. So I think that this group is really locked in, and I'm very happy about what I've seen from them. Very happy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Beating a team by 40 and then having to play them just about a week later, not only once, but two more times, like you really never know what's going to happen. So I was really impressed with the way they played.
I think it's kind of impressive how well they played on Wednesday, considering that Donovan Mitchell had one of his tougher nights from the field, I think, compared to what we've seen throughout this month and a half stretch without Garland and Mobley. He really struggled to find his range, and he settled for, I think, some bad shots. Only two of his 24 shots came in the restricted area, which isn't what you want to see.
In the first game, right?
Yeah. So that's not really what you want to see from someone like Mitchell, who's done a lot of his damage by getting downhill and then kicking out to shooters. So I think being in that game as much as they were is kind of impressive. And then you kind of saw what a good version of a Mitchell game looks like in that second game, and they won.
Yeah, I think the first game they got down early. The Bucks jumped on them, and then he tried to go back and play hero ball. Right? Like I think it was like, all right, well, let me revert back. We're going to need a superstar in this game, and that wasn't the case. Then Tony's favorite player, Isaac Okoro, got hit with the two early fouls. But then also you have the Bucks team and Damian Lillard specifically hearing how he got shut down by Isaac Okoro for a week. It probably got to him like, this guy, and I think it was bound to happen. It was just one of those games. It was bound to happen.
I think the overall
real quick, I just wanted to say, push my Okoro agenda. He held Damian Lillard. He's holding Damian Lillard to 9 of 34 shooting on the season. So,
hey, take your victory lap.
I got to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Jackson.
All of us can take real victory laps. You can take just mini ones,
Yeah. Well, your victory laps going global with the Sam Merrill agenda,
right.
But me and Ice will get there.
Sure. Yeah, but I do think Okoro does deserve credit for how he guarded Dame. I think it's dumb to blame calls going against you in games, but I think that Okoro really did a good job in that first game against Dame, and a lot of his damage was getting to the rim. And I think the Cavs were just a step late in how they were helping, and I think that caused a lot of those problems, as opposed to like Isaac Okoro kind of not being up to the challenge. So I think it was a good game from him, and then you saw on Friday again, like, oh, this is what it looks like when the Cavs are kind of locked in.
And the Bucks played inspired, what was that, Wednesday? They had just fired their coach. They hear that they're going to get Doc Rivers. Like, it was like a perfect storm of just, look, it was a winnable game. Like you said, Jackson, like they were in the game. It wasn't ever a time where you were like, they can't win this one, like until the final score. But they were in the game. Personally, I think they played fine. The Bucks were just better on that night. Friday was more indicative, I think, of like a real game between the two teams, and showed like it's the reason why Cavs fans should be kind of excited, going forward, because like Friday night you got the Bucks' best effort, you got the Cavs' best effort, and the Cavs came out on top.
I think it's kind of interesting that the Cavs and Bucks have played 4 times during this like transition period for both teams, because like the first game they played, it was right after the injuries to Garland and Mobley, and I think that was like they missed all those threes. Remember, they were like Sam Merrill got hurt in the game.
Yeah,
Max Strus went 1 for 10 from 3, and Mitchell went
They
like
just missed
1
a
for
lot
10.
of open shots.
Yeah. So they missed. So they like outplayed them, but then they kind of they lost because they missed a million threes.
Their process was better, but they didn't execute basically.
Right.
But even that game was a close game, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. They were winning in the third quarter, and then they had a chance to win, and then it was just kind of like, well, if Max Strus makes 2 of 10 from 3, I think they win this game. But he went 1 for 10, so that's kind of how that game was. And it was like they were getting good looks, so it wasn't like they were just getting bad looks. But that was kind of in the middle of like the Bucks kind of like tailspin. I think everything went wrong for them after the in-season tournament, where they were like, this guy is not the guy. And to Jason's credit, everyone said that Adrian Griffin was going to be fired, but Jason left the press room before the game and said, this guy doesn't know anything about what he's doing.
It was amazing because, and I hate that it happened, and it sucks that it happened to a guy who's at the time they were 30-13. Like, that sucks, right? But like the night before or 2 nights before, the game before, we had sat there and listened to Billy Donovan give like amazing answers to every question, like thought out answers, 10-minute thought out answers. And it was like, wow, that's a head coach right there, right? Like, he was explaining things. And then you listen to Adrian Griffin and you're like, wait, what? Like, that's, huh? Like, he was openly saying like, yeah, I had to defer and I did this and I changed because they said. I'm just like, wait, no. That's not how it's supposed to go. So yeah, that it wasn't surprising, but it was surprising because it's still 30-13.
He said spacing, because I counted. He said spacing 9 times during like a 5-minute interview, and it felt like every time he was kind of like, oh, this is a buzzword that like people talk about, so I'm just gonna be like, yeah, dude, we just need more spacing. Like Giannis provides so much spacing, and it's like
felt like you were scrolling through Cavs Twitter.
Kind of.
Yes. He felt more. It felt more like a fan talking about the Bucks than the head coach.
Yeah. I think the Cavs Bucks, their 4 matchups this year have been really interesting, especially when the Cavs destroyed them by 40. That team just did not look like they had their heart in it. Obviously, Giannis didn't play. The energy was different. These last 2 games felt more like what you would expect to see in a matchup between them. And I think it's notable that the Cavs, even though they lost that first game in Milwaukee, they were right in it. They fell down by, I think, 21, and they fought back just over and over again. They wouldn't go away. I felt like they did their best to attack the drop in that game, and a lot of shots didn't fall. I also think, as Jackson hit on early on in the episode, that Mitchell kind of settled for jumpers when he needed to attack. And as Jason mentioned too, there was also a little bit of that hero ball mode where maybe he should have worked to get Allen more involved or the rest of his teammates. Game 2 was just one of Mitchell's best games of the season. It's one of the Cavs' best wins of the season. So I want to know from either one of you, what adjustments did you see from the first game to the second one?
One of the things that I saw was they helped on Giannis both games, where they tried to make him finish over multiple defenders or make him kick out to shooters. But the second game, I thought they did a really good job of doing it before Giannis started his drive instead of like after. And that's what led to his 6 turnovers and his 3 like offensive fouls. Was instead of Dean Wade starting to help when Giannis put the ball on the floor, Dean Wade was already in that position. So Giannis had to kind of like overcompensate. And that's where he had like that one hook on Wade where there was already help there. And then the one time
he had a lot of hooks.
Yeah, and then like the one time he ran over Jarrett Allen when Jarrett Allen had good position, but it was Max Strus was in the lane, Dean Wade was already shading over. It was if he didn't run through Allen like he did, he would have had a hard time to kind of navigate everything. So I think that's what the Cavs did a better job, where it's not really a big like schematic change, but more so attention to detail. Like they were more locked into what they needed to do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was just, I think it was a very good indicator of like a playoff series. It's two games, obviously, but like we're in the same city. We're gonna play this team back to back, a day in between. Like you make adjustments. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, what didn't work in the first game? Okay, well, this is how that can work. Like, in the first game, Dean Wade was on Brook Lopez. But Dean Wade is a decent defender. He's not a superstar. Cavs Twitter, do not get on me. He's not a superstar, but he's a good defender. He's a decent defender. And they had him on Giannis and, throwing different bodies and things like that. Like it was just different little adjustments. The biggest adjustment was Mitchell played like he's been playing previously outside of Wednesday. That was the biggest adjustment.
Yeah, that's a great point. The first game in Milwaukee, Mitchell shot 2 of 11 from deep. So when the Bucks are playing that drop coverage, just wasn't able to make them pay. Game 2, he shot 6 of 12 from deep. And I mean, that's how you get the Bucks out of their drop coverage. Another adjustment that I liked, that I tried to highlight as best I could on Twitter, is that rather than just continuing to run a traditional pick and roll and attack the drop that way, they started to give Allen the ball and run some off ball actions and try and get him more spaced out horizontally, if that makes sense, that drop defender really has to make a choice between, am I picking up the ball or am I staying on Allen? They didn't score many points off of that. There was a lot of lob passes that just were too high or Allen couldn't guide it home, but it's as simple as getting Brook Lopez to have to move a little bit rather than just sitting in that tank down there. The Cavs also, I think one of the biggest things is just their defense. When they get stops, offense is a whole lot easier because now you're not attacking that setup Milwaukee defense. And that's when, the Cavs are at their best, when they're able to turn defense into offense.
And the thing is, like for Milwaukee, their biggest weakness is one of the Cavs' strengths, guard play. Like, especially when Donovan is playing like an all-star player, an all-NBA player. Like, they can't guard that. Like, Malik Beasley is not a good defender. Damian Lillard is not a good defender. Pat Connaughton is not a good defender. Like, they tried
to throw Jay Crowder on him. That was that didn't last long.
He's not a good defender. Like they don't have anybody who can check a guard. And that's the campaign is not a good. Like we can go down the list. So when you're on like as a guard and you're a top 20, 25 player in the NBA, you're gonna have success against them, and that'll keep you in games like that. So
one of the things that I think was interesting is that when Donovan didn't have it, like they did a good job. Like he did settle some, but they also did a good job of keeping him out of the restricted area with Brook Lopez kind of standing there. And one of the things is that they were like loading up on him, and there wasn't another guard to throw it to like, hey, you break down the defense, you find the open guy, you do something. And if they had Darius Garland in that game, I think it goes very differently, just because Darius Garland can break down a defense, especially when the defense is loaded up on the other side. So I think one of my main takeaways from that game was like, yeah, this is why like this team's ceiling is always going to be with Mobley and Garland. And I think one of the issues that we've seen at the beginning of the season was that they weren't optimized to like play well together. Now it's whether they can play well because, their style of play, they have the guys to be a good team. Adding these guys into what they have could make them a great team.
If they come back and they are like, they've seen like we have the success of how this team is playing. Mm-hmm. If they come back and can fall in and still do the things that they do well, but like fall in line, just move the ball, it'll come back to you. Maybe you don't average, maybe Darius doesn't average 20, but he averages 15 and 8 assists and, less turnovers, Jackson. Like if that's the best version of this team, that's not a bad thing. Like if the ball is still moving and the ball is still, moving around. If same thing with Mobley, like, he doesn't have to start shooting, 5 threes a game, 6 threes a game. But like if he can still be a floor spacer in some aspect, a cutter, anything like that, this team can be dangerous.
I'm interested to see how they use Jarrett Allen, because they've used Jarrett Allen a bunch above the free throw line, and they weren't really doing that beforehand, or at least not in a way that was this noticeable. So can they keep doing that? How does that affect Mobley? Can Mobley, because still, if Mobley's just hanging out in the dunker spot, it doesn't really help all that much. But if you're able to kind of get him screening, moving with like setting screens for Strus, it would be great if he set a screen for Garland off ball, but that would require him moving. So like if they're able to do those things, it's like, wow, this all makes sense. Cause it kind of felt like in the beginning, it felt like they were just playing like they were last year, except for like, we have Max Strus, but that helps because, someone's guarding Max Strus as opposed to the other guy. But
Okoro,
like
that's what he's talking
Okoro,
about.
Jetty, pick your poison.
Yeah.
Lamar Stevens.
Whoa. Okay. Sorry, John. So, but it's like, wasn't like, obviously it really hurt when you have 3 guys standing in the paint, but 2 guys standing in the paint still hurts things, especially when you have like, Garland, who's not like a paint rim finisher and stuff like that. So it still muddies things. So I want to see if they can kind of adapt this new Jarrett Allen play with Evan Mobley.
So who knew that Jarrett Allen was going to be the floor spacer that they needed, and it's not Evan Mobley, maybe, like
Not me.
Like Jarrett Allen has been working on that free throw line jump shot, that elbow jump shot, and like we see him doing it in pregame, and like he's confident when he shoots it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. And then, Jackson, you've written about this a couple of times. I know you say I don't read your stories, but I do. You've written about the big man to big man assist, the Jarrett Allen assist to Evan Mobley. It's usually that way. But like they start and they do that and use that. If Jarrett Allen can consistently knock down that 15 to 18 footer, and like Evan Mobley, he was leading the league in dunks before he went down. Like if he can stay in that dunk, he can still stay in that dunker spot. The offense just changes a little bit to what we thought Evan Mobley was going to be. But if Jarrett Allen's the guy who spreads the floor, then okay, we'll take it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because just to set up the segment, Evan Mobley's return is coming probably by the time this episode's out. We're recording on Sunday. He's expected to play on Monday against the Clippers. He'll be on a minutes restriction, but the one thing that I'm so excited about and I've been talking about is that everything you just said, if Jarrett Allen has just shown that he can play above the break a little bit and handle the ball and do what we were maybe expecting Mobley to do, like that's a win. Yeah, a lot of people are worried about what happens when you add Mobley back into this lineup. And it's like, well, everything we just learned hopefully will translate. Mobley is great in the paint. If we're going to say, hey, maybe he's not ready to be that floor spacer, have as much ball handling responsibilities as we wanted to, well, great. We can stick him in the paint. Let Jarrett Allen do his thing. Is the spacing going to be perfect? No, but if you have Mobley hovering down there and Allen's able to keep doing what he's been doing, that's a pretty good duo to have. And it's something that not many teams can do against the drop coverage. So I'm really excited to see this.
And
one thing,
there's something to be said about having 2 really good defenders in the back line. Like there's something to be said about that. And I mean, yeah, tomorrow it may look funky, against the Clippers with reacclimating, Evan getting back into it, and but he'll take the Tristan Thompson minutes, like that 8 minutes, that so somebody else doesn't have to play. You know what I'm saying? So like it's okay. This is the perfect time actually. So I'm happy.
Hopefully Evan learned how to set a screen for Sam Merrill.
Okay.
Because
his brother can do it.
That's what they need.
Hopefully that rubs off.
Isaiah does it great. You would not believe.
It's
phenomenal.
Listen, Jackson, he over exaggerates a lot, but Isaiah Mobley's screens for Sam Merrill, thing of perfection.
The one thing that Jackson's 100% not exaggerating on.
He's got that.
I mean, I didn't exaggerate any of Sam Merrill's
No, you were right.
ability.
I also want to point out, on a side, like Jackson has been the most vocal about it, but everybody saw that Sam Merrill was like really good.
Anybody who watched him could see it.
Yes.
Listen. Nobody else was jumping out in front of this. I was. So, Jason, you had a chance to jump out in front of this. You didn't.
I mean, I've written several stories talking about how good Sam Merrill is.
Right, but not like last year. Not
But
like
Jackson
last year.
They all came last year.
Whatever. I don't read you.
And we know that. And over the summer. Like he showed all of this, in all honesty, he showed all of this in summer league. Like he's really, and I a part of that's a different conversation. Never mind.
Go for it.
No, I mean, a part of me wonders, like, did we really have to pay Max Strus that money when we have a guy, now Max Strus is a lot more than a shooter. I will say that he's been a pleasant surprise coming from Miami. So I don't want to rag on Max Strus because I think Max Strus is needed. He's played every game this year. He hasn't missed a game, played through injury. I really like Max Strus. He's been very good. But Sam Merrill is really good as well.
Yeah.
And he's a lot cheaper. And he's not 4 years, $64 million. And he can shoot it better than
he's better at the Max Strus specialty than Max Strus is.
What I will say,
go ahead.
What
Jason.
I will say is that Max Strus. So the Cavs currently have every team. When you watch the Thunder play, everybody can pass, shoot, and dribble on the court that gets the ball. Like the Cavs had 3 guys before Max Strus and Karis LeVert, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland. Adding Max Strus is just another guy who can actually do all 3 of those things in a way that even
you can run a pick and roll with him.
Right. Sam Merrill can do those things, but kind of Sam Merrill's ability, he finished over Giannis. Well, not over Giannis, but finished a layup with Giannis there. And it was because
now we're exaggerating.
I meant he finished with Giannis there because Giannis was more concerned about him pulling out and going to the 3-point line. So Sam Merrill uses his shooting to create these angles, but Max Strus is just kind of a basketball player who does basketball player things. So I think they really need that, and I wouldn't advocate for more Merrill minutes over Strus, but I think it's interesting that they had the movement shooter that they really needed, especially for the bench unit there, because I think when it was kind of sold to us, the Max Strus signing, it was this is the movement shooter we need. And it's more no, this is the high volume shooter and the basketball player that can do multiple things that this team needs.
But I don't think we knew that, coming from, because in Miami, he was just a shooter. He didn't display all of it.
He flashed a little bit of it, but
not
to
it
this
was a flash.
degree.
It wasn't consistent. He's this guy. Here in Cleveland, he's been that guy. He's been good defensively. He rebounds well. He passes well. He's been really good in Cleveland. I think when he was signed, everybody said, okay, the Cavs need shooting. They went and got shooting.
Right.
But Sam Merrill was already on the roster.
Yeah.
I want Jackson to take a victory lap, but Sam Merrill has been this guy. We've seen enough.
Just Evan needs to set screens for him. That's the whole thing. We just need Evan to set screens, and he needs to make contact on those screens. And I hope him and Isaiah have talked about it, because they were so good.
That's true. The last point I wanted to make about Strus is that with all the great stuff he's doing outside of shooting, you kind of just hope that he has shown in the past that when he's hot, he really is that level of a shooter. He just hasn't been very consistent this year, and really throughout his career, he's been a bit inconsistent. But with a player like that, you just hope, man, if he goes on a burner in the playoffs, that can get you through an entire round. So happy with the way Strus has played, and very happy with Merrill's resurgence, or arrival. But let's bring this back to Mobley and focus on him a little bit here for this segment.
That is what is written on the bottom, so I guess we do have to talk about that.
Listen, this is my fault for not having a Sam Merrill topic, because I knew it would probably come up.
Jason brought it up just so the record.
It's okay.
My bad.
It was inevitable. It's worth bringing up, but
I did bring it up. So but Jason really talked about it. I talked about Isaiah and Evan.
It's true. to wrap up to really get the Mobley conversation started and then wrap it up. The main thing I want to know is, what does his return mean for the team, and primarily what's going to be the biggest adjustment? I think you may have already mentioned it, but Jason, you can take it away.
I think right now the biggest thing is just reacclimating and getting back into the flow. Like, it's really hard for a guy to go out, and then see the team's success, and they're wanting to be a part of that. Like, no, I can add to it. I can add to it, because the pressure is on. Like, him and Garland, when they come back, if this thing falls off the rails again, like, people are going to be looking at. We're going to hear all of the, hey, you got to get these. One of those guys has to go, and with the way that Jarrett played, people will start saying foolish things like trade Mobley, trade, like that's foolish, right? But so there's pressure there, but just take it time. Like, it's going to take time. I think that one of the good things is he's going to be on a minutes restriction, so you can stagger him and Allen, so you don't have to change a lot of what you've been doing, especially like from now until for about a month or so. Like, he's going to be on that restriction, so staggering him and Allen, still having one big on the floor and things like that, and letting them play spot minutes together. But like, as long as there's just one big on the floor, it's going to be fine, because you don't have to change much.
I think it's interesting defensively, both of them together. I think that's going to be interesting, because the Cavs have been incredible defensively over this last 9-10 game stretch, where I don't know, like, they've changed how they're playing, in the sense that they're like not helping as much and kind of trusting everyone more so on an island to like defend their guy. And I think you've really seen that with Donovan Mitchell. He's played his best defense of his career. I kind of touched on this last episode, where like before this kind of stretch here, throughout his whole career, it's like you're playing with Gobert, just kind of do your thing on offense and Gobert will clean it up on defense. And the same thing last year with Allen and Mobley behind him. Whereas during the stretch, you're saying, oh, he has a 6'10" wingspan, and he can actually use it, and he can actually be not a traffic cone, but even like a good defender. So that's where it's like, I'm kind of wonder if they're going to rely less on Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen kind of over helping, because the defensive rebounding has been great, and that's something that they've struggled with. And it's not because like Dean Wade's a better rebounder than Evan Mobley. It's because they're staying more in their positions. They're not over helping. They're not like breaking the defense just because Jalen Brunson dribbles the ball on the floor. So that's kind of what I'm almost more interested in, because if you can keep up this defense while adding what many people think is like one of the 3 best defenders in the league to it, that should be great, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. I honestly don't worry about his defense. Like, he's an all-world defender, because one thing that him and his brother, we like to give Isaiah shout-outs anytime we can. But one thing about them, like, they're extremely smart players. And like, while Isaiah might not be the athlete that Evan is, they're always in the right position, right? Offensively and defensively. So like, I don't think that Evan is all of a sudden going to now not be able to defend. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's not going out there chasing point guards or anything like that. But like, that may take time to come back. But being in the right spot and being 7 feet, that doesn't change.
I think it's more so how the team philosophy is in terms of how they're kind of instructing them to overhelp. Because I don't think like Jarrett Allen was just like short circuiting every time he saw Jalen Brunson drive and he like ran to the free throw line to help. I think it was more so this is what the team's philosophy was. And I think that's what's really changed over this time, is that they're not over helping. They're staying more connected to 3-point shooters. And like, you're not getting those games where it's like, oh man, this team just happens to hit it 50% of their threes against the Cavs again. And it's like, yeah, that happens because like Kevin Huerter got off 9 threes. Like, you can't let Kevin Huerter get off 9 threes and expect him not to hit any of them. So it's like, that's what I think has been really really impressive during this stretch. And it's not that, oh, Evan Mobley's coming back and they're going to he's going to mess that up. It's more so is the team philosophy going to revert back to what it was at the beginning of the season and last season, where you allowed that to happen more?
Yeah, I think last season and early this season, before the injuries, they were trying to funnel everything to their all-world defenders, right? Just send it all there. And what they found out during this stretch is, hey, we can keep Jarrett Allen fresh and out of foul trouble if we just stick our man, right? And now you're adding another all-world defender who can stick his man. So that's the area that I don't think, should change much. Now, the challenge is Garland, who's not a great defender, because now with Mitchell playing point guard, essentially, and him being committed to defense, it looks a little better because they're putting a more traditional lineup out there, with Mitchell at the 1 and Strus at the 2, and then Wade. It's a more traditional lineup. With Garland, you go back to what your strength is, but it's not traditional. But as long as they are still committed, then they should be fine.
I agree with everything that you guys said here. It's going to be an adjustment period. Fortunately, the schedule is pretty easy here coming up. I mean, they play the Clippers, but then after that, they have the Pistons, a Spurs game, a Wizards game. I think the minutes restriction is going to help ease the whatever adjustments there's going to be. You're going to have an opportunity to stagger. And in a way, I'm not sure when Garland will be back, but even just having Mobley come back first and then reintroducing Garland later, hopefully the Cavs will have an opportunity to really figure all this out and get the awkwardness out of the way. Again, with Allen hopefully being able to operate above the break, that opens a lot of fun stuff for Mobley. And I'd like to see if he maybe attacks the offensive glass a little bit if he's going to be down there more often. But let's transition now and
one thing
round out the
I do
episode.
like that you talk about the rebounding. since Mobley went out, they're fourth in the league in offensive rebounding and second in a defensive rebounding. And that's something that they weren't good at either of those beforehand. And they really improved in both. I think in their last 10 games, they're first in both. So it's can they supplement both sides of the court with that? Because that's one of the things where it's the offense, it's so much easier to play offense when you have, here's another chance at it. Whereas last year, it was what's the point of having two bigs if you're not reaping the benefits of having those two bigs?
I think part of that was, and it sucks, but I think part of that was Tristan Thompson playing more. He went from playing
True.
3 spot minutes, 5 minutes here and there to actually being relied on. And I'm not saying he was getting all of the rebounds, but a lot of that.
It helps boost your numbers.
I think it's obviously Tristan helps, but I think it's also important. Jarrett Allen I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's gotten a ton of offensive rebounds during that stretch too. And that's where I'm more interested to see if that keeps going. It's they bought into the Tristan Thompson philosophy of hey, if I'm bigger than these guys and the ball goes up, I can punish these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that Washington game, he had 9, and 7 of them came in the third quarter. He was.
Well, that's not an NBA team, so that doesn't count.
True, but it was oh wow, it's he figured it out. Hey, I can. People are scared to rebound against me or whatever. I can get these, and that's why he's got this streak going.
Yeah. And a big part of it, too, is the fact that the Cavs are shooting so many threes. I think that makes getting offensive rebounds easier. Those long ones are a lot easier to get, especially with Allen operating a little higher up.
Also, when it's that spaced out and Donovan is getting downhill, Jarrett Allen's guy has to come over. So when your guy comes over, no one's boxing out Allen. I got the rebound, So
it's nice for him to be on the other side of that for once.
Right. So, and when you have Evan there too, kind of in that way, you don't have those this guy is completely open, and if the ball comes near him, he's just going to grab it. So that's where it's how does that adjust when Evan's back?
It's going to be interesting. But over the last month and a half, really, the Cavs have had defensive resurgence. They were the best defense in the NBA last year. Started off a little shaky this year, but since then, read off a couple stats here. They're allowing the fewest points in the NBA, the fewest second chance points in the NBA, third fewest points in the paint, and the fourth fewest 3-point makes on the 5th worst 3-point percentage. The Cavs have been absolutely clamping down on teams. I think there's a bunch of different reasons for it. I think Allen being a monster defensive rebounder has helped a lot. They're really limiting teams getting extra opportunities to score. With Garland out, you have more of a rangy, switchable team from Okoro and Dean Wade being really good point of attack defenders. And better point of attack means Allen isn't being stretched as thin, and he's able to be that defensive anchor and get those rebounds. And finally, Mitchell's commitment to playing defense. He's been genuinely a positive defender. He's breaking up plays. He's been really disruptive in passing lanes, and he's turning those into points for the Cavs too. He's in the 88th percentile in transition, and he's top 5 in both fast break points and points off turnovers this year. So I think it's really just a perfect storm for the Cavs. What do you guys think has been the key to their resurgence on defense?
I think it's just I kind of talked about it, just kind of being able to stay out on shooters, I think has been really big. People talk about opponent shooting luck, and they say that it's more luck based. And I don't really believe that. I believe if you are making shooters feel your presence, they're not going to make as many shots as they do when they don't. And obviously there's games where like someone gets hot and there's nothing you can do about it. But I think that's what the Cavs have really done well. Like since the beginning of the new year, opponents are shooting 34% from 3, which is really good. And they're also limiting 3-point looks. The Cavs are, I believe they're 8th in the league in 3-point frequency allowed during that stretch. And I think that's something that gets really overlooked when you talk about the Cavs defense, especially when they're able to pair it with like how good they're still protecting the rim. So they're still first in the league in rim shooting percentage from opponents. So it's like, that's a deadly combination when you can both protect the rim and the 3-point line. And last year they were doing one, but not the other.
Yeah, I think they're forcing the most mid-range shots in the NBA during the stretch. I feel like I saw a tweet saying that, so don't quote me, but with the stats you just said, it's got to be close.
They also play some pretty terrible shooting teams.
Yeah, that helps.
I'm not trying to downplay what they've done because they've been at a disadvantage. That you don't lose 2 starters, 2 all-star caliber players, and just think like you're supposed to go 14-4, or
right.
you know, like you don't think that, right? So I don't want to downplay that, but they got the Wizards twice, they got Detroit, they got the Spurs.
One thing I will say is we were at that Portland game in the beginning of the year where they were just like, oh, we're just not going to get out onto shooters in the second half. And it was like Portland just made like every 3. And it was like, oh, this is an outlier shooting night. And it's like, no one's covering these guys. Yeah. That's why they're making all these 3s. Yeah. So it's like, that's where I'm impressed, even though like in the aggregate, it's like, it's not really impressive beating the Pistons and Spurs, but they're not getting those stupid like shooting performances against them, which just happened all the time.
They did it to Orlando and Milwaukee too in that stretch. Which
Orlando can't.
Orlando
shoot.
Doesn't shoot.
Yeah, Orlando can't shoot.
Well, just all around lock them down.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think it's something to be said. Like, I don't want to say like they were using NBA games as scrimmages. You know what I'm saying? Like testing things out. But like in a way, that's kind of what happened. Like they said, okay, look, what we were doing at the beginning of the year was not working. Let's try something new. And we have the talent to win these games anyway. And we have the excuse of if these games go bad, we don't have 2 guys. Like we're missing 2 guys. So like, but what happened was they found something, it worked, and now we have the hottest team in the NBA.
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting is that like it's when you look back at this run, you're like, oh, the Cavs played great defense. That's why they're still winning. And it's like the first 2 weeks of their run, they played pretty horrid defense. It's only since like January, since like the new year, it was like that's when things flipped, especially after that Toronto game. Yes. I think that's where things like really changed. And that's where it's like, I feel like that's where the team has found something more than like, oh, let's shoot 3s, because it's like in the beginning of the year, that's all JB Bickerstaff was saying, like, let's shoot 3s, let's shoot 3s, let's shoot 3s.
In preseason, he was saying that.
Right. And he wasn't saying like, hey, let's guard the 3-point line better, or let's have more integrity when like in how we handle drives. So like that's the thing that I'm really most interested to see if that sticks, because it's like they've always wanted Garland to shoot more 3s. It wasn't like they were like, yes, Garland, we're very happy you're taking 4 3s a game. This is phenomenal. Please keep it up. oh yes, we love that you're turning it over every 2 plays. Like that's great. It's like they didn't want that, but like the defensive philosophy is what's actually changed during this stretch.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you kind of had to, one thing about it, like, you look at this team and outside of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley and maybe Tristan Thompson, like these guys, like Dean Wade is decent. Isaac Okoro is making a lot of people apologize, because of his.
You do not need to apologize. I will say his offense is actually like kind of worse than it was last year. He's shooting worse at the rim and worse from 3.
But they're not as reliant on him is the key.
Right.
So it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah, but if they played him in a playoff series, you still have these
don't
issues.
Have to guard him. You don't have to guard him.
Like
it's still a problem, but right now it's being masked. And he's
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it was masked in the regular season last year. So like my concern
I don't
is
know.
No. My concern is
they didn't have any backups.
You play the Knicks.
They didn't have a Sam Merrill or
They did have Strus. Sam Merrill. They just didn't play him.
Well,
I told them to.
They tried to play Danny Green. That's how desperate they were.
I told them to do that too. So that's on me.
Colossal mistake.
But like right now, it seems like it's going to be Cavs and Knicks again. It seems like that's the most likely outcome. Who do you want on Jalen Brunson the whole time? You want Isaac Okoro. Well, who do you?
But it's not going to be possible for the
right, and that's because the offense, his offensive progression is still he's pretty much the same guy on offense. I think he's playmaking more. He's playmaking more, which is really cool. But he's not developed his game where he's like handling the ball above the break or like doing anything besides like I'm gonna attack in transition. If I don't get it in transition, I'm just gonna leak out to the corner, and then we're just gonna like kind of go from there. And that's where I'm still concerned about this team because it's like, well, if they were able to trust Isaac Okoro on Jalen Brunson last year, they probably don't have any of these issues that they had, but they couldn't because the Knicks just ignored him. So
I also think that him returning from injury, and he also just happened to miss like his first 4 shots in that series. So I don't want to start the whole Okoro discussion because we're already 45 minutes in.
I'm just saying
I get what you're saying.
It's the same issues I
think it's a little better. I think he's looking a little more confident. He has been used in slightly different ways, and the most important thing to me is just that they don't need him to be a floor spacer anywhere near as badly as they did last year. Last year, he was that third guy where like if he's not going to hit that corner 3, it's over. You can't play him. Now it's like, well, we can put Strus in, and Okoro's going to be a guy coming off the bench playing spot minutes, being 10, 12 minutes a night, and he's going to be in there for one purpose.
But if you can't,
is Okoro the guy coming off the bench? So Dean Wade,
I would have started. Okay. Oh, well, when they're fully healthy, it would be Strus at and then I would have Okoro. I've always said you haven't heard this comparison yet. I've always said Okoro to me is like boneless Andre Iguodala on the Warriors. You bring him in. Maybe you can play small ball lineups with him. You have him play defense, run in transition, and hopefully by the time he reaches his prime, he'll be able to play make a little more. Again, I'm not saying he's Andre Iguodala, but that's the role. I said boneless for a reason. That's the role that you would want him to play. Is like, hey, you're complimenting everyone around you. I've said this before on the podcast.
Listen, part
of
the defense, part of the resurgence. I'll say this: part of the resurgence is they're getting steals, which is what Isaac Okoro is good at. Like, so he can run in transition. It's the half court offense that is, to Jackson's point, very concerning. Now, I will say, in the beginning of the year, I would always lean over to Jackson and I would say, why is Okoro literally going to the one side of the floor and he would not move? Here lately, he would just stand there for the entire possession, and it was killing me. And that's when I started, I hate Okoro. However,
I never went that far.
I did at that time. Recently, though, you've seen him move, you've seen him cut, you've seen him make back, like what Jackson used to always say. He just needs to make a basketball play. He's making those plays now. So if he's gonna do that, you can't ignore him because he's still good enough to get to the rim, make things happen. So but if they're gonna get steals, if Donovan Mitchell is gonna lead the East in steals, things like that. If that's gonna hold up, then Okoro will be fine.
I think the problem is they still need, like, the best version of this team is like oh, you have Jalen Brunson, sweet, we have Isaac Okoro. Oh, you have Damian Lillard, sweet, we have Isaac Okoro. And if you can't match Jalen Brunson and Isaac Okoro's minutes, which obviously I don't think you want to play like Isaac Okoro 41 minutes, but
Correct.
if you're not like starting and ending games with Isaac Okoro, you're still in the same spot you were in before. Because what good does Max Strus' shooting do if he's on the bench? Because it's not like you're going to be like, oh, Darius, sorry, you're not playing. We have Max Strus now. So, and that's where I'm like, the problem is still the same, even though like it looks better during the stretch because obviously Dean Wade is out there and not Evan Mobley. So it feels like there's more room for Isaac to do those cuts and that's where maybe Jarrett Allen handling the ball more, that alleviates some of these issues. But I think kind of some of the still like the higher level issues are still kind of there. And maybe it's just, hey, we trust Donovan to play better defense.
Yeah.
now.
I mean, look, they're not a fixed team. They're still flawed, right? They still have flaws. They still have things that you're like, yeah, if they could get a legitimate 3-and-D guy that is a starter level player, I think they would explore that. But if this is the roster, if this is the guys that they're going to go with, if this is the group, there's ways to get around it. JB's going to have to just play with the lineups a little more,
Yeah,
and
right.
That's. But I think Okoro has gotten better throughout the year, but he's not where, to Jackson's point, he's not where the Cavs need.
Yeah,
he's still not where I wouldn't start him. As I said, I do think he's been better than last year. I think he's still a developing player.
He had nowhere to go but up from last year.
True. Yeah. And really, even if it's just a result of having a little extra spacing around him with Wade out there, that's why I think if he's coming off the bench, hopefully you're staggering the bigs and you'll still be putting him in the best position for him to be able to handle the ball a little bit. But
I think
the good thing is the Cavs have other options now. They don't have to play Danny Green. They don't have to say, Jetty, we know you were mostly riding the bench most of the season, but now you're going to play playoff minutes.
Yeah.
Well,
like,
he
hopefully now
didn't
they
have to ride the bench the whole season.
That's true.
Well,
I do agree with that.
I mean,
but there was reason. We don't need to open up another Jetty discussion too now. We'll be here all day.
They do have more options, but I still like Isaac Okoro was so good on defense, and I think
it sucks that you can't keep him out there potentially.
Right. This stretch highlights how good he is on defense. And I think that's what you're just like, every night you're just like, man, like he's really good on defense when he's kind of given the ability to do that. And then you don't notice him on offense. Like, whereas before you definitely noticed him and not in a good way. So I think that's where like the biggest difference is. And that's where I'm kind of like, man, like I just wish you could just put him out there and say, hey, Jalen Brunson, have fun.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We'll definitely have to talk more about Okoro and that whole dilemma because I think it's going to be, as we get closer to the playoffs, that's going to be a big X factor for this Cavs team. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. Thank you, Jason, for coming on. It was great talking some Cavs. Thank you to everyone who watches and listens. Please consider subscribing and go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Thank you, Brian.